Did you know that one dinner party in the late 18th century may have altered the fate of the entire New World? Picture this. It's 1790 in Philadelphia, the temporary capital of the United States. The elite of the newly established country is in heated debate over where the federal government should permanently reside, and, even more controversially, how to address the nation's staggering war debt. The Union is young, fragile, and divided, teetering on the edge of collapse. Enter Thomas Jefferson, a man with a penchant for French cuisine and political machination. Jefferson invited fellow Virginian and Secretary of State James Madison, as well as Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, to a private dinner at his modest residence. What these three men discussed over plates of elegantly served pheasant and Madeira wine would go down as one of the most significant and secret compromises of the fledgling nation. Here's where the intrigue begins. Hamilton, a stalwart Federalist, championed a controversial financial plan to assume state debts incurred during the Revolutionary War, consolidating them under the federal government. He believed this plan was essential to stabilize the nation's economy, but faced fierce opposition from states that had managed their debt responsibly, particularly Jefferson and Madison's Virginia. Meanwhile, Jefferson and Madison were equally passionate about having the nation's capital relocated to a location more favorable to the agrarian southern states, away from the mercantile north of cities like New York. The stakes were monumental. A failure to reach an agreement could exacerbate tensions between states and potentially dissolve the delicate ties that bound them. Yet behind closed doors, during this 6-hour political feast, a deal was struck. Hamilton would gain Madison's support to enact his financial plan. In return, Jefferson secured what he considered an equally important concession. The capital would be established on the banks of the Potomac River, in what would later become Washington, D.C. It was a win-win, though modern historians debate who came out ahead in the long term. The deal exemplifies the fragile nature of compromises in a democracy, movements born out of necessity rather than mutual agreement. And yet, without this deal, the history of the United States could have unfolded far differently. But did you know there was another layer to this story? Both Hamilton and Jefferson, while political foes in almost every respect, mutually understood the power of breaking bread together, especially in private settings. Jefferson, in particular, had a knack for hosting culinary diplomacy, a technique he'd honed during his years as minister to France. This seemingly ordinary dinner, no pomp or ceremony, transformed the trajectory of a nation. Ideas that tore politicians apart in public settings were instead smoothed over in the intimacy of personal connection and shared wine-filled glasses. Imagine today's rival politicians sitting across a dimly lit table, haggling over the fates of millions over a meal. Could such a setting even exist in the 21st century world of soundbites and viral tweets? And yet, in 1790, this approach not only worked, but it reshaped the map, policies, and governance structures of a burgeoning country. The story of this monumental dinner is a powerful reminder of the complexities of history and the human elements that shape seemingly impersonal events. It wasn't debates in the Congress or sprawling discussions over formal desks. It was the simple yet extraordinary act of sharing a meal. The Compromise of 1790, now embedded into the bedrock of US history, reminds us of one thing. Even the weightiest of decisions can arise from the most modest of moments. So, the next time you sit down for dinner, think about how conversations shared over food have not only brought people together, but in at least one case, changed the course of history. Incredible, isn't it? That's the power of food and diplomacy. Fascinating history deserves moments like this shared with the world.